This is the Read to Lead podcast, episode 538. Hey there, I'm Jeff, and this is the Read to Lead podcast, the podcast dedicated to your personal and professional growth. And when it comes to personal and professional growth, one of the things that those in my online community and I talked about last month was how AI plays into all that. This is a topic about which many people have some fear, some trepidation. Is this going to impact my job? I once heard it said, and I agree, that it won't be AI that takes your job in the future. It'll be someone using AI that'll take your job in the future. So the reason I've invited the guest I have today is to talk about this very topic and to help you feel more comfortable and at ease going forward with leveraging AI and AI tools. That guest's name is Jeff Frownfelter. Jeff is, I believe, only the second ever guest we've had on the show who's not written a book, at least not yet. But he's someone I've known for decades, someone who began his career as a coder, now leverages AI every day in his work, and I just can't think of anyone better qualified to talk to us about this topic. But first, before we get to Jeff, I mentioned a moment ago my community online. I'd love for you to be a part of that if you're not already. You can find out more about it when you go to jeffbrown.me. You can sign up for a free 2-week trial to get started and browse our now over a year's worth of content, an entire library of guest expert sessions, Ask Me Anything sessions, book summaries, and more. Your free 2-week trial is at jeffbrown.me. We've got several hundred in the community, and one of the best ways I know to foster personal and professional growth is to surround yourself with people who take it as seriously as you do, and this community does. Again, it's jeffbrown.me to start your 2-week trial and to find out more. jeffbrown.me. Jeff, welcome to the Read to Lead podcast. I'm excited to have you here. I say that almost every week with every guest, but I think I've never meant it more than I mean it right now. So thanks for being here.
Thanks, Jeff. And ditto. It's good to see you.
Well, it's the Jeff and Jeff show today. Jeff and I go way back. I was doing the math, probably 42, 43 years back to when we were, sophomores in high school. And we met there. We're both in the marching band. We both attended college together early on, would ride together to school, kept in touch over the years, and recently had a conversation about AI. And that is a topic that is of high interest of those, especially in my private online community, the Read to Lead community, but also more generally, more broadly, listeners to this podcast. And though Jeff doesn't necessarily have a book on this topic, he is as qualified as anybody I know to answer questions related to this topic, because he, like me, and this is what really piqued my curiosity about having you on, Jeff, is you talk about people in your line of work not using AI as much as you or as much as you thought they could benefit from. And I see that with the average knowledge worker. So many who know about AI, they know it's out there, and many, I think, just don't realize the extent to which they could benefit from using it. There's good and bad with everything, and certainly AI has its potential nefarious uses. But I want to talk about some of the benefits of AI, and I think you're as qualified as anyone. Jeff is unique in that he's creative. He's an accomplished pianist, a composer, a lyricist, and then he works in IT. They talk about left brain, right brain. Jeff is just brained. Jeff is both brain, I guess you would say. He's very talented in both sides of the brain, I guess. Well, Jeff, talk first a little bit about your background and what you do for a job day to day.
Well, I've worked with technology since, as you know, the late 80s. And when I say technology, before it was called IT, it was called other things, information services. So I started out as a programmer. You recall that I'm an original code junkie.
Mm-hmm.
That would stay up 3 days at a time, drinking Mountain Dews and eating candy bars and writing code. So always looking to invent. But and I go to museums now with my daughter, I see actual hardware that I used to program on.
Oh, wow.
I've watched the technology, just through my vocation. And I got into technology, and I'll just be full disclosure here. I have had a sight impairment my whole life. And even back in the old days, in the 80s, when there were just bulletin boards and 300 baud modems, I was attracted to it because how it could help me to adapt in so many ways. That's what drew me to programming.
Mm.
So that's my origin. It's the life's necessity that became the vocation. And so I've been immersed into it personally and professionally all these decades. I used to be fascinated about the idea of AI. If you recall back in the 90s, I think I remember having dinner with you and your wife one time. We was talking about AI and about how there's hardware challenges there, but we
Mm-hmm.
could see what needs to be done. And now I see it all coming to fruition. So
Mm.
I've worked nonstop in the field, both on the programming side, network infrastructure side. I've seen it all, cybersecurity,
Mm.
and in my current job, I find that AI has, at least from my standpoint, started to become a way of life and necessity as well, for the same reasons I got into technology.
Well, one of my goals here is, as I hinted earlier, is to help the average knowledge worker, the kind of person that listens to this show, understand maybe some ways they could be using AI that they haven't thought about. So I thought I'd start by asking you if you could provide, to the extent you can, some specific examples of maybe tasks that AI has helped you automate or streamline in your work.
Some real living and breathing examples. I will say I was asked about a year ago to redo a whole process that in Microsoft 365, there's various automation tools you can use, but it's
Mm.
very scripted. And I'm somebody that's in my workplace that I have more to do than I can possibly get to. So the last thing I have time to do is sit down and to immerse myself in what I call comma and parenthesis hell. Anybody who codes knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
So I would pull up AI, and we can talk more about what those tools are in a little bit here, but I would pull up AI and I'd be starting to code, doing the coding, but I'm feeding the AI what I'm doing. And I'm also telling it what my intentions are. Like, okay, I've come this far. I need to do this. And, or I have done this and something's not working. And I
Mm.
think there's a missing parenthesis or a missing comma somewhere. I don't have the eyes. And especially increasingly, Jeff, as you know, as we get older, over 50, things get worse. And I don't need to be looking for the needle in the haystack. And so I am literally using it as a partner in the process.
Mm.
So it does have faster eyes. Surprisingly, sometimes I find that it actually misses.
Mm.
It'll actually miss that comma or parenthesis that's missing, that's causing it to go awry. And I'll say, wait a minute, I think you're a little off here. And yes, you're all right. And we figure it out.
Right.
Sometimes it'll add code for me if I
Mm.
ask it to and do it correctly. Sometimes not. So that process I wrote quite a bit of code for. In the end, I would say it was a collaborative work, and I got it done probably in a fraction of the time. Had I otherwise done it by hand, I would have also been learning my way into a language. I've learned about 17 languages in my life, and it would have taken a lot of time to learn my way in and do it all and troubleshoot it. So probably I got it done in probably 90% faster, thanks to AI's help.
Well, you mentioned Copilot, Microsoft, and you hinted at earlier some other tools that you use. I'd be curious to know more specifically what some of those other tools are. I can talk about certainly some of the ones that I use. But in particular, if you think there are tools that you would recommend the average knowledge worker use to improve, say, information management or research, managing and analyzing large volumes of data, that sort of thing.
In the population that I serve, because I try to keep things as simple as possible. In other words, if I can say you can use Copilot to do images and, up to 4,000 character queries and so on, and you can chain those together, I try to recommend that they use what we have provided in shop. But however, as you probably well know, and I bet you can recommend another tool to me, but like there's a PDF AI, literally PDF.ai, pretty straightforward in good conscience into users that I serve with different intermediate or basic skill level. You can dive right into that product. It's self-explanatory. I think the little introductory video is like 10 seconds and you dive right in. So what that means is, while I can't give Copilot a massive document to go through or a PDF, and there are massive PDFs that I have to deal with sometimes. They're technical journals or just policies and procedures. I stick it in there and I begin to have a conversation with it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm having a conversation with the document. Now, I didn't coin that term. That's what everybody talks about. So what that means is, yes, it's a very shorthanded way of going about this, but if I don't have time to weed through a 100-page technical document, for example, in order to get to the conclusion that I need to fix a problem, better than me hitting Control F and searching that PDF is for me to go and say, all right, AI, looking at this document, is there an answer to this question? And it's better than a find into the document because it's also making meaning. So it knows why I'm looking for that. It's saving me the time of doing, control F, enter F3, going, boom, 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 and trying to find the context. It's making meaning of every hit. And then often comes back to me with a fair answer, sometimes not. Their product is pretty good, but I have found that if I give a short document to like on Copilot, I get more insightful answers from for some reason. I'll see it not miss things.
Yeah, a couple of the tools I use with regard to looking at or breaking down large PDF documents. For me, oftentimes that's a book that I've received in PDF format. Of course, everybody knows Chat GPT. There was a time when you couldn't upload documents to Chat GPT, but you can do that easily now. At least I know you can with the paid version. I don't know if that's the case with the free version. And then Google's got a product called Notebook LM that allows you to basically bring in research from different formats, whether it's a PDF, whether it's a website URL, it could be just plain text, it could be from your Google Drive, a number of different sources. And then when you go to ask Notebook LM a question, you can ask it of one of your documents in that notebook or all the sources you have in that notebook or specific sources in that notebook, and it'll query just the ones that you specify. This would be especially helpful, assuming that privacy issues are handled appropriately. For companies to be able to have their knowledge bases in a system like one of these we're talking about, so that they could easily query their own knowledge base. I have found this super helpful as a person who is a lover of note taking and what I call note making, and I've even created a course along these lines called Note Making Mastery that listeners will be familiar with. And it's all about personal knowledge management. And the thing I find really powerful is to be able to use AI to query the things that are in your knowledge system specifically. There are times certainly when you need to search the internet for things, but there's also times when you're, say, working on a book, working on some other project, and you've collected stories and quotes and research and other things from a number of different sources. When AI can be leveraged to help you query just those things that you've said are important to you, that to me is super, super useful and powerful at the same time.
Yeah, I concur. I mean, just in the field of technology, any number of countless problems that I have to solve, I never Google search anything anymore.
Same.
I literally reach into AI because usually it can get me there faster.
Yeah.
Much faster. And these aren't usually like a single questions and need for it to get a hit on a discussion board or a Reddit.
Mm-hmm.
I need context. I need meaning. And you know how it is when you go through the Reddit, you're like, okay, you're browsing through. It's like about 2 minutes later, no, this doesn't apply. Go to the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really, especially in technology, is scary is when you're delving into something and an answer and you don't realize that it doesn't really apply to you, and you're late at night, you're about to make a decision to act on this solution. And I've actually found at times when I was not certain, I've said, okay, Chat GPT, I've come to the conclusion I should do this and this. Here's what I've based it on. Do you have any thoughts on this? Am I off base? And I've had it come back and it says, you might consider this. And it's really pulled my feet out of the fire several times.
There are plenty of just practical applications to this. I was just sharing a story with somebody the other day that I think is applicable here. We have a dryer that's a year old and had gone out or was still running, but running when it wasn't supposed to be running. We'll put it that way. And I wanted to run some tests before I called, the manufacturer and got other people involved. And I was having trouble finding the physical manual that came with the dryer. A quick online search, and I found the PDF of the manual. And I wasn't really even sure what tests I needed to run. So I uploaded that manual to, I think I used Chat GPT, and I had Chat GPT query the manual for me. And in an instant, I had exactly the information that I needed. When things like that happen, just as practical everyday uses, I just think that's so fun. It made something that would normally have been a laborious, process, and something that would have taken me a long time, and something that would have been just really irritating to even have to do, was done very quickly and actually became fun at the same time, at least for me. Jeff, how do you stay updated with the latest AI trends and advancements? Are there any particular sources that you follow on a regular basis to sort of stay in the know?
Well, because we're a subscriber to 365 in the corporate environment, that is, the Copilot is our main product.
Mhm.
I find myself, getting a lot of my information is just from that orbit that I'm in. But, Chat GPT, I separately from that. It's the habit that never stops. And I stay up to speed just by pulling information from any countless number of sources all the time. Just keep up to speed and using it actively. So not just reading about what it does, but I can tell you about the ins and the outs from my experience about how well it does and how well it doesn't do and how well it did last year versus now. I've watched it evolve. It's insane how much it's evolved. And then we got the next Chat GPT coming out as well. Yeah, I work with peers in technology that surprisingly, some who keep up on it, but so many of them sort of scratch their head when they see me using it. It's really strange.
What are maybe some future AI developments that you're most excited about? Anything on the horizon? And how do you think they will impact your work, if they indeed will?
Well, with AI growing up, evolving as it is, as well as robotics, those two coming together, we know that now there are robotics that can maintenance one another. And of course, those become, the basis for a lot of concern about jobs and so on. But somebody will have to service those as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess I'm excited about these innovations moving forward because, again, I got to speak very personally here. I've never driven in my life. I've come very far without being able to drive. And that's really tough in the IT field. I've had to turn away jobs because I could not drive to locations. Doing buses wouldn't do it. The self-driving vehicles, they're out there. They're doing well. They got to do a lot better.
Right.
But that's going to be a game changer for those of us who are limited in terms of what we can and cannot do. And just transportation alone, Jeff, transportation alone it's a godsend. If that solution comes because of the evolution of AI and robotics to where it can be trusted and it works, it'll make a big difference.
Do you see any potential risks or downsides to an increasing reliance on AI?
Oh, you mean like Skynet?
Something like that, sure.
Well, that worked out. Arnold was he became the good guy, so
worked out in the end.
It'll work out. And in all seriousness, related to what I said, I am very concerned. It's those who are doing the development. It's sort of like a virus getting out of a lab. So if something becomes sentient, but it has its values and morals, its ethics are not necessarily what we want them to be. And being that it is better in some ways than some of us in getting things done. If it sees flaws with us, what will it do? If it has too much access, if it's allowed to get out of that lab. So Skynet thing is sort of a joke, but sort of not, especially where there's military applications.
Yeah, I interviewed an author whose interview I'll link to, and he wrote a book called Evil Robots, Killer Computers, and Other Myths, The Truth About AI and the Future of Humanity. He is not very bullish on the evil robots and killer computers taking over. And so that's another side of this that I think is worth mentioning. And if you haven't heard that interview from about 3 years ago, I suggest you check it out. Stephen Schwartz is his name, and I'll link to that in the show notes. So Jeff, last question. What advice would you give to someone listening right now who's just starting out, maybe using AI or has maybe been using it for a little while, but just isn't quite comfortable with figuring out how to make the most of it?
Well, first to start out, somebody who is just not even waded into that pool yet. There's a lot of fear and a lot of apprehension. So the first advice I would give is, look, this is not something to feel threatened by. Again, the term co-pilot or partner. This is free help. It's nothing to be afraid of. There's been innovations come, when the internet came out, there were people who were timid about it until they realized what it could do for them. I would liken it to that. This is another one of those moments, those milestones of technology. This is, do you Google? Okay, you Google already. Okay, then you can use AI to do a power search and streamline what you do. You don't have to worry about it doing something to you, taking your job. It's just another type of tool. So there's a psychological part. Okay. As far as how to get trained up in it, I guess I would say that knowing how to be effective in prompting. When I interact with the AI, it's like just as if I'm working with a secretary. I need their help. And so if I cannot communicate well with a human being, I'm probably going to struggle a little bit with AI. but you should try to communicate the best you can, expressing your needs to the AI. As far as training resources and materials, my advice is just from general usage and my experience. I come up to users who are using it now, and they start to delve into it, and I do see this where they don't know how to talk to it, and I say, talk to it like you do me.
Right.
You need help? You tell me what the problem is. You tell me all the givens, as many clues as you can provide me. You'll notice that when you prompt me that way, I'm able to fix that problem for you more effectively. Likewise, that's the solution.
That is such great advice. And I can cite a recent example of doing exactly that. Jeff and I have had several conversations, asynchronous conversations via voice chat on Facebook Messenger leading up to this. But as I sat down to chat with Jeff about this topic, I really wanted to kind of formulate some formal questions to ask him. And just as we were connecting on Zoom, I went to ChatGPT, and this is what I wrote. I said, my old friend Jeff, who works in IT, says he's using AI in some really incredible ways that allow him to be more efficient and productive. This was just what I remembered from our previous conversations. I think his use of AI could be quite helpful to knowledge workers, folks who listen to Read to Lead. What questions should I ask him to bring out the best information from my listeners? That was my prompt, and I typed that right off the top of my head. I didn't think that through. That just, like you said, I just spoke naturally to the AI the way I would speak to a human being. And I got 7 different categories of questions, many of which I've asked you during the course of this conversation: general AI use, productivity enhancements, AI in IT, knowledge work applications, AI and personal development, the future of AI, and practical advice. And so it made it super simple. I didn't have to spend an hour trying to figure out what I was going to ask Jeff. I just asked AI based on recent conversations with Jeff what I should ask Jeff, and AI did a pretty darn good job in about 30 seconds. Well, Jeff, this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much. I think this was quite helpful. I knew you would be the perfect person to talk about this. You did mention something that made me think about other authors who've been on the show. We also recently had on, and I wanted to remember to mention him, an author of a book called Autonomous Transformation: Creating a More Human Future in the Era of AI. That's Brian Evergreen. That was back in December, the day after Christmas, as a matter of fact, last year. So I'll link to that interview as well as the interview with Stephen if you want to just dig more deeply into the topic of AI. So again, Jeff, thank you so much. Fantastic conversation. Appreciate you being here.
And thank you, Jeff. It's great connecting with you again.
For more on today's episode, or to connect with my friend Jeff Frownfelter, you can go to the show notes page for this episode. That's at readtoleadpodcast.com/538 for episode 538. Want access to that mega prompt that I referenced, which is a great way to learn anything new, in my opinion? Try Read to Lead Plus free for 2 weeks. You'll find that mega prompt inside the community. The website again is jeffbrown.me. That does it for this week. Hope to see you next time. Until then, as always, remember, leaders read and readers lead.